This is my true story. My son locked me in the bathroom for 2 days because I used too much hot water. No food, no chair, just a cold floor and tap water. I listened to him laughing with his wife while I sat there alone. I gave him my whole life, and he gave me a locked door. When he finally opened it, I said nothing. But in my mind, I had already decided what I was going to do. Before I tell you what I did next, comment where you're watching from and what the time is it there right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach to more people like me. I raised my son alone after his mother passed away. She died when he was only 8 years old, and from that day, I promised myself I would never let him feel alone or unprotected. I worked every job I could find. Mornings as a janitor, evenings at a warehouse, weekends fixing anything people would pay me for. I went without new clothes for years, so he could have school uniforms, new shoes, and the best books. I skipped meals so he could eat 3 times a day. Every birthday, I made sure he had a cake, even if I had to bake it from scraps in the kitchen. When he wanted to play sports, I paid for his gear. When he needed help with homework, I stayed up late to help him, even after 12-hour shifts. I thought love and sacrifice would be enough to raise him into a man who respected me. When he grew older, I paid for his college so he wouldn't have debt. I didn't want him to struggle the way I had. I worked overtime, sometimes taking double shifts, to cover every tuition bill on time. I didn't tell him that while he was studying in warm classrooms, I was cleaning offices at night, my hands numb from cold water in the mop bucket. I thought it was worth it because I was investing in his future. I imagined him graduating, getting a good job, and maybe one day taking care of me the way I had taken care of him. When he got married, I wanted him to start his life without worry. I gave him a house, the house I had worked decades to buy. It was my wedding gift to him. I thought it would secure his future and keep him safe. I even told him, "This is yours now, so you'll always have a place to live." I didn't mention that the deed was still in my name, because in my mind, there was no reason to doubt him. He was my son. Why would I ever need to protect myself from my own child? I moved into one of the smaller bedrooms so they could have the main part of the house to themselves. I stayed out of their way. I cooked my own meals. I cleaned my own room. I thought I was being respectful. I didn't want to interfere in their marriage, and I believed that giving them space would keep our relationship peaceful. But little by little, things began to change. The gratitude I thought he felt for me, it started to fade. I was no longer the man who sacrificed for him. I became the old man in the back room. He began making small comments about the way I lived. At first, it was about the TV. You watch too late at night. Then it was about food. Stop buying so much milk. I told myself it was just him being stressed from work, maybe even worried about bills. But the comments kept coming. The way he looked at me shifted, from warmth to irritation. I had given him everything I had. I didn't keep savings for myself because I thought he would always make sure I had what I needed. I believed our bond was built on trust, respect, and love. But standing in that house, the one I bought, the one I gave him, I started to feel like a stranger. I could sense it in the way he avoided sitting with me, the way his wife barely spoke to me, the way they whispered behind closed doors and stopped when I walked in. Looking back, I think the problem started when I made life too easy for him. He never had to fight for anything the way I did. He never knew what it was like to be cold, hungry, and still have to go to work. He never learned how heavy sacrifice feels on a man's back. Because of that, he didn't value what he was given. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't value me anymore either. I still remember the day I first noticed his patience had run out. I had been fixing the garden fence in the back. It was something I always did to keep the place nice. He came outside, saw me working, and instead of saying thank you, he asked, "Why are you making noise right now? I'm trying to relax." I laughed it off, thinking maybe he was having a bad day. But inside, it hurt. It hurt because I realized he didn't see me as helping. He saw me as a bother. Even then, I didn't let my mind go to the dark place. I still thought, he's my son. He'll come around. I thought about all the years I had been there for him. How could he forget the man who carried him on his shoulders when he was too tired to walk? The man who worked himself sick so he could live without debt? The man who gave him a house without asking for a penny in return? I told myself blood was stronger than irritation. That deep down, he still respected me. But that belief, that hope, was the same thing that blinded me to what was coming next. I didn't see how far the disrespect would go. I didn't see how my own son, the boy I raised with my own hands, could turn around and treat me not as a father, but as someone in the way. That was before the night he decided to lock me in the bathroom. Before I realized that all my sacrifices, all my love, and all my years of work meant nothing to him anymore. Before I understood that sometimes the people you give everything to are the same people who will take the last piece of dignity you have left. It started with little things, so small at first that I told myself not to make a big deal out of them. My son began acting like the house wasn't mine anymore, like I was just a guest who stayed too long. He would walk into my room without knocking and tell me the TV was too loud, even when the volume was barely up. He complained about the way I folded laundry. He told me I shouldn't cook certain foods because the smell stays in the house too long. These were things I had been doing for decades, but suddenly they were a problem. I brushed it off as stress from his job. I told myself marriage changes people. Maybe he was adjusting to having both his wife and me under the same roof. But deep down, something in me started to feel uneasy. The warmth in his voice when he spoke to me was gone. His words were shorter, colder. I could hear the irritation in his tone, as if every little thing I did was some kind of inconvenience to him. It didn't stop there. He began controlling things in the house, the thermostat, the lights, the hot water. I'd go to take a shower and find that the water never got warm enough. I later realized he had turned down the water heater to save money. If I left a light on in the hallway because I didn't want to trip at night, he would turn it off and say, "You're wasting electricity." I had lived frugally my entire life, but now it felt like he was treating me as if I didn't understand basic responsibility. The worst part wasn't the rules, it was the way he enforced them. He would say things with a sharpness that cut deeper than I wanted to admit. It wasn't, "Dad, could you turn off the light when you're done?" It was, "Why are you leaving lights on? Do you think this place runs on free electricity?" That tone, it made me feel small. It made me feel like I was living in a stranger's house instead of the home I had bought with my own two hands. His wife never defended me. If anything, she seemed to encourage the way he spoke to me. I'd hear them in the kitchen, whispering about how I don't know how to live in a modern house, or how I still act like it's my place. They laughed about it, thinking I couldn't hear. But walls are thin, and words like that echo in a man's chest long after they've been spoken. I still didn't say anything. I told myself family goes through ups and downs. I thought if I just stayed quiet, things would get better. I even tried to help more, washing dishes before they got home, mowing the lawn early so they could rest on weekends, fixing anything that broke without asking for thanks. I thought maybe if I showed them I was trying, they'd stop treating me like a burden. Instead, the opposite happened. The more I tried, the more they acted like I was in the way. If I washed the dishes, they'd complain I didn't load the dishwasher the right way. If I mowed the lawn, he'd tell me I cut it too short. It was as if nothing I did was good enough anymore. I began to feel like my presence was something they tolerated, not welcomed. They had their life, their marriage, their plans, and I was just the old man in the background, taking up space. It's a feeling that's hard to describe unless you've lived it. When someone you love doesn't outright tell you to leave, but every word and action quietly pushes you toward the door. There were nights I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong. I raised him with respect. I never spoke to my own father the way he spoke to me. I never ignored my father's presence or made him feel unwanted in his own home. So why was my son doing it to me? The answer came slowly, not in words, but in the way he looked at me. It wasn't the look of a son seeing his father. It was the look of someone seeing a problem that needed solving. One evening, I overheard him telling his wife that once I was out of the picture, they could finally renovate the house the way they wanted. He spoke about it like I was just another piece of old furniture that needed to be removed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I realized for the first time that my place in his life wasn't secure just because I was his father. Blood didn't mean loyalty, love didn't mean respect, and gratitude. Well, gratitude could disappear faster than I ever imagined. I still didn't know how far he would take it. I didn't know the day was coming when his irritation would turn into something far worse. But I could feel it. The shift. Something in him had changed, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that the next time he lost his temper, he wouldn't just raise his voice. I was right. It happened on a cold evening, one of those nights when a hot shower feels like the only thing that can wash away the heaviness of the day. I had spent hours fixing a loose fence panel outside, my hands numb from the wind. My back ached, my knees throbbed, and all I wanted was 10 minutes under warm water. That was it. 10 minutes. I didn't even think about the water bill or how much hot water was left in the tank. I had never been told there was a limit, at least not one that felt this strict. I just wanted to stand there, let the steam loosen my stiff shoulders, and breathe without feeling like a guest in my own home. Halfway through, I heard the pounding. At first, it was a light knock, but it quickly turned into loud, angry thuds. My son's voice came through the door, sharp and accusing. "How long are you going to be in there? You're wasting all the hot water." I tried to answer calmly, telling him I was almost done, but before I could even finish my sentence, he shouted back, his words dripping with contempt. "You think I'm made of money? You have no respect for other people in this house." There was no reasoning with him. His voice was so loud it drowned out the sound of the running water. And then, without warning, I heard the distinct click of the lock from the outside. My heart sank. He had locked me in. At first, I thought it was a joke. A cruel one, maybe, but a joke nonetheless. I called his name, told him to unlock the door. No answer. I banged on the door, thinking maybe he'd realize how absurd this was. But all I heard was the sound of him walking away. Minutes passed, then hours. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, wrapped in a towel that quickly grew cold. The steam faded, replaced by the chill of the tiles. My stomach growled, my throat dry. I had nothing to eat, nothing to drink, except the trickle of water from the sink. From the other side of the door, I could hear him and his wife laughing, their voices muffled but unmistakable. They were watching TV, eating dinner, living their lives while I sat trapped in the smallest room of the house I owned. Every sound from outside was a reminder that they had chosen to put me here, and that they weren't in any hurry to let me out. The first night, I barely slept. The bathroom floor was cold and unyielding, and every time I drifted off, the ache in my back or the sound of pipes groaning would jolt me awake. By morning, my head pounded from dehydration and my hands trembled from hunger. I thought maybe he'd let me out once he cooled down. But when the second day began, I realized this wasn't about cooling down. This was about control. This was about humiliation. He would pass by the door and I'd hear the faint jingle of keys, but he wouldn't stop. Sometimes he'd linger just long enough for me to know he was there, then walk away. It was like he wanted me to understand my place, like he wanted to break me without laying a hand on me. By the end of the second day, something inside me shifted. The anger was there, yes, but beneath it was something deeper, a final, quiet breaking point. I knew in that moment that whatever bond we had as father and son was gone. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. On the morning of the third day, the door unlocked. Just like that. No apology, no explanation. He didn't even look at me. He just muttered, "Don't waste water again," and walked away. I stepped out, my legs stiff and my head light. I didn't respond. I didn't yell. I didn't tell him how cruel he had been. I just walked to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew one thing. This house, the roof over his head, the walls he thought belonged to him, they were mine. And before long, they wouldn't be his anymore. The first thing I learned in that bathroom was how quickly time can turn into an enemy. At first, I thought in hours, telling myself I'd be out soon, that maybe he just wanted to prove a point. But as the hours stretched into a day, then two, the clock stopped feeling like a measure of time and became a reminder of how forgotten I was. I had no food. My only water came from the small sink, and even that felt like swallowing metal after a while. The bathroom had no window, so I couldn't even tell if it was day or night unless I listened closely for the sound of the TV or the hum of the fridge outside. Those became my only markers of the world continuing without me. The air in there felt heavy, stale. Every breath carried the faint scent of damp towels and old cleaning products. I paced the small space, back and forth, until my knees begged me to stop. Then I'd sit on the cold floor, my back pressed against the tub, staring at the same white tiles until my eyes blurred. Sometimes I heard their voices. My son's laugh, loud and sharp, followed by his wife's softer giggle. The sound of plates clinking, a door opening and closing, the creak of the couch when they sat down. Life was going on out there. Meals were being eaten. Shows were being watched, while I sat here in silence. Not once did I hear footsteps that slowed in front of the door. Not once did a hand knock to ask if I needed anything. By the second morning, my body began to protest. My lower back ached from sleeping in awkward positions on the floor. My stomach felt like it was folding in on itself. My head was light, my hands trembling from weakness. I tried doing small stretches to keep myself from stiffening up completely, but even that took energy I didn't have. At one point, I caught myself wondering if they had actually forgotten about me. But then, I'd hear movement outside, a door shutting, a cough, and I knew they hadn't. They just didn't care enough to end this. I remembered the years I had spent raising my son alone, the double shifts I worked so he could have a warm bed, full meals, a college education. I remembered the nights I skipped dinner so he could have seconds. I remembered the pride I felt when I handed him the keys to this very house on his wedding day. Every sacrifice I'd made was locked in here with me, reduced to nothing more than a bitter taste in my mouth. I thought about calling out, maybe pleading, but the thought made me sick. If I had to beg my own son for freedom, then whatever love we had left wasn't worth saving. That's when the anger came, not loud, not fiery, but cold. The kind of anger that doesn't shout, it waits, it watches, it plans. I realized I was no longer the father in this house. I was just another expense, another mouth to feed, another body taking up space. By the end of the second day, my decision was made. I didn't know exactly when or how, but I knew I would leave. And when I did, I wouldn't just walk out. I would take away the one thing he thought he could never lose. When the door finally unlocked on the morning of the third day, the light from the hallway hit my eyes like a blade. I stepped out without looking at him, my body stiff, my face calm. I walked to my room, shut the door, and sat on the bed. I had no intention of yelling, no intention of demanding an apology. The silence would do more damage than words ever could. He didn't know it yet, but in locking me away for 2 days, he had unlocked a part of me he'd never met before. The part that could walk away without looking back. When I stepped out of that bathroom, I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. No questions, no shouting, no demand for answers. I just walked past him as if he were invisible. My feet carried me to my bedroom, and I shut the door quietly, the soft click of the lock sounding louder than any words I could have spoken. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the stillness wrap around me. The room felt different now, not like a place of rest, but like a planning ground. My eyes scanned the familiar furniture, the dresser, the old safe in the corner that had sat untouched for years. That safe held more than papers and documents. It held the last card I had to play. I knew better than to move too quickly. If revenge was going to work, it had to be quiet, invisible, and precise. I couldn't let him suspect anything. So, for the next few days, I played my part. I walked through the house at my usual hours. I ate at the same times. I even gave him short, polite answers when he spoke. To him, it probably looked like I had let the whole thing go. But inside, I was building a plan that would end with me walking away forever. I thought about leaving immediately, but that would have been letting him win. He would have gone on living in this house, the house I bought, the house my hands had paid for brick by brick, thinking he had forced me out. I wanted him to feel what I felt in that bathroom, trapped, powerless, and stripped of control. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I would sit with a pen and paper, listing the steps I needed to take. Step 1. Confirm the ownership of the house. I already knew the answer. The deed was still in my name, but I wanted every legal detail in place. Step 2. Contact my lawyer. Step 3. Arrange a private cash sale. Step 4. Move the money somewhere he could never touch it. Step 5. Disappear without a trace. The most dangerous part of the plan was keeping my face calm during the day. Every time I passed him in the kitchen, every time he made small talk about bills or groceries, I had to remind myself not to let the truth show. My voice had to stay steady, my steps measured. If he sensed something, he might start digging. And if he found out before I was ready, everything could fall apart. I began clearing small things from my room. Nothing obvious, nothing he'd notice. A few important photographs tucked into a drawer. My passport slipped between old books on the shelf. The safe key, which had been hidden in a box of screws in the garage, was moved quietly into my pocket. The hardest part wasn't the planning. It was keeping the anger under control. Every time I saw his face, I remembered those 2 days in the bathroom. The cold floor, the empty stomach, the sound of his laughter on the other side of the door. My hands would tighten, my jaw would lock, but I'd swallow it down. I knew that the day would come when I wouldn't have to hold it in anymore. During one of those quiet nights, I opened the safe. The papers were all there. The original house deed, bank documents, insurance files. My name was printed in bold letters, untouched, undeniable. I smiled for the first time in days. This house had always been mine, and soon it wouldn't be his. I thought about telling him right then, throwing the truth in his face, but I stopped myself. Words can be forgotten. Actions cannot. If I told him now, he would have time to prepare, time to fight, time to make excuses. No, this had to happen like the turning of a lock, sudden, final, and impossible to undo. By the end of that week, the pieces were moving. My lawyer knew exactly what to do, and I trusted him to handle the sale quietly. We agreed to keep everything off the market, to avoid any public record until the deal was done. I found a buyer within days, a young couple eager to pay in cash. I didn't tell a soul, not the neighbors, not friends, not even distant relatives. This was between me, my lawyer, and the buyer. The fewer people who knew, the safer my plan was. And so, I continued my performance, the quiet old man, harmless, defeated, going about his days like nothing had changed. But inside, the fire burned hotter than ever. Every step I took was leading me toward the moment I would walk out of this house for the last time. And when I did, I would leave him with nothing but the walls he thought he owned and the silence he had once locked me in. The thing about my son is that he never paid attention to the details. He thought once you give someone a gift, it's theirs forever. But that's not always how it works. When I bought him this house as a wedding gift years ago, I never actually transferred the deed into his name. At the time, I told myself it was for legal protection, but maybe, deep down, I already knew there might come a day when I'd need that leverage. That paper, the one with my name in bold letters at the top, had been sitting in my safe for years, untouched, and he had no idea it existed. He just assumed the house was his. He talked about it as if he built it himself, bragged to friends about owning it, even argued with me over how I should use his utilities. But the truth was, the whole time, He had been living under my roof, literally, and paying nothing for it. I remembered the day we bought it. I walked through every empty room with him and his new bride, watching their faces light up. I thought I was giving them a start in life. I thought it would be a place where family would gather, where laughter would bounce off the walls. I never imagined those same walls would one day hold me prisoner while my own son locked me away. Now, that memory wasn't sweet. It was fuel. The same house that had once been my proudest gift was going to be my greatest weapon. When I sat across from my lawyer and slid the deed across his desk, he looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "He doesn't know, does he?" I shook my head. "Then you hold all the cards." We went over everything. The legal process, the timeline, the risks. There weren't many risks. Legally, it was mine. Selling it was as easy as signing my name. The only thing my son could do to stop it was nothing. He couldn't stop it. That was the beauty of it. I decided the sale would be private, quiet, and fast. No for sale signs. No public listings. I didn't want him catching wind of anything until it was too late. The buyers would be ready to move in the moment the ink dried on the contract. Every time I passed him in the hallway, every time he asked me to take shorter showers, every time he made some offhand remark about my house, I felt the weight of that secret pressing against my chest. It wasn't a burden, it was a gift I had given myself, the knowledge that any day I could take away everything he thought was permanent. Sometimes, when I was alone in my room, I would take out the deed and just look at it. My name, printed clearly, no one else's. It was the kind of power you don't waste, and I wasn't going to waste it. I started preparing for life after the sale. I made a list of countries I might move to, places where the air was warm and no one knew my name. I checked my passport's expiration date. I called an old friend who lived abroad, just to see how things were over there. I didn't tell them why I was asking. In the evenings, I could hear my son and his wife in the living room, talking about vacations they wanted to take, renovations they wanted to do, things they'd fix up in the house. I'd sit there silently, knowing every word they spoke was meaningless. They were making plans for a future that didn't exist anymore. One night, I heard him talking to a friend on the phone. "This house is ours forever," he said. "Dad's just here until, you know." His voice dropped, but I caught the tone, the one that suggested I was just waiting to die so he could get everything. I smiled in the dark. He thought I was the one running out of time. But the truth was, his clock was ticking, and I was the one winding it down. The morning after I confirmed everything with my lawyer, I woke up with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The plan was set in my mind like a chess move I'd been waiting my whole life to play. I wasn't going to confront my son, shout, or demand an apology. That would give him the satisfaction of thinking I wanted something from him. No, this was going to be quiet, silent. The kind of revenge that doesn't just take back what's yours. It makes them wonder for the rest of their life how they never saw it coming. The first step was setting the sale in motion. My lawyer reached out to a couple he knew, serious buyers with cash ready. They'd been looking for a property just like this. He told them it was a private sale and that they'd have to move quickly. They agreed. I didn't even have to meet them. All I had to do was sign my name when the papers were ready. Next, I went to the bank. I didn't withdraw anything yet. That would be too obvious. But I opened a new account under my name only, one my son didn't know about. I arranged it so when the house sold, every cent from the sale would be wired straight into that account. From there, it would be transferred overseas. The goal was simple. By the time he realized the house was gone, I'd be gone too. I kept my routine exactly the same to avoid suspicion. I still ate breakfast at the same time. I still sat in my chair by the window in the afternoons. I still asked him about his day when he came home from work, even though I knew the only answer I'd get was a grunt. At night, though, my mind raced. I thought about the first day I'd leave, what I'd pack, where I'd go. I decided on just one suitcase. I'd take my important papers, my passport, a few clothes, and the watch my wife gave me on our wedding day. Everything else, every chair, every dish, every picture frame, would be left behind. A week into the process, my lawyer called. "We're ready to move forward. Closing date is in 3 weeks." My heart didn't race. It slowed. 3 weeks wasn't long at all. 3 weeks, and the place my son thought he owned would no longer be his. In those 3 weeks, I played my role perfectly. I let him talk about his plans for the house. I let him tell me to turn off the light if you're not using it, and don't take too long in the shower. I didn't argue. I didn't even smile. I just let him believe the world was still his to control. Meanwhile, I was also making quiet arrangements for my new life. I called a travel agent and booked a one-way ticket to a small coastal town halfway across the world. I wired a small amount of money ahead to an account there, just enough to secure a place to live when I arrived. My lawyer advised me to keep my departure completely secret. No note, no phone call, no forwarding address. "Disappear clean," he said. And I knew he was right. People like my son don't deserve closure. They deserve the silence that comes after you take away the one thing they thought was theirs forever. I remember one evening, about a week before closing, my son was sitting on the couch with his wife, talking about remodeling the kitchen. He said, "We'll start next summer. We can knock out this wall." His wife laughed, dreaming out loud. I sat in my chair, sipping tea, and thought, you won't even own these walls next summer. The final week before the sale, I withdrew a small amount of cash each day, just enough that it wouldn't raise suspicion. I kept it hidden in my suitcase, ready for the morning I'd leave. And then, the day before closing, I took one last walk through the house in the early morning when no one else was awake. I touched the door frames, the windows, the kitchen table. Not because I was going to miss it, but because I wanted to remember exactly what I was taking away from him. By the time the sale papers were signed, everything was ready. My flight was booked, my suitcase was packed, my escape was hours away. The game was almost over, and my son didn't even know he was losing. The morning of my escape came quietly. No alarm clock, no rush. I woke before the sun, the room still dark, the air heavy with that strange calm you get before making a choice you can't take back. My suitcase was already by the door. I'd packed it the night before. One change of clothes, my passport, my papers, the cash I'd been collecting, and the watch my wife gave me all those years ago. Everything else stayed behind. This wasn't about things. This was about freedom. I moved slowly, careful not to wake anyone. My son and his wife were still asleep down the hall. I could hear his faint snoring. For a moment, I thought about knocking on his door, waking him up, and telling him exactly what I thought of him. Every memory of sacrifice, every time I'd put him before myself. But no, words are wasted on people who only hear themselves. Silence would cut deeper. I slipped the house keys into an envelope addressed to my lawyer. He'd need them for the new owners, who would be arriving that afternoon to start moving in. The sale was complete, the funds already wired into my account. Legally, this wasn't my son's house anymore. In fact, it never had been. That was the part that would burn him the most. I walked to the front door and opened it slowly. The cold morning air hit my face. I looked around. The street was empty, just a thin mist hanging over the quiet road. My taxi was parked a few houses away, engine running, driver waiting with the trunk open. I stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me without looking back. No pause, no goodbye. As I walked to the taxi, I thought about those 2 days in the bathroom, the cold floor under my back, the taste of tap water from the sink, the sound of his laughter through the door. It had been a moment of humiliation, but it had also been the moment I stopped being afraid to lose him. That's what he never understood. Once a parent stops fearing the loss of their child, they become free. The taxi ride to the airport was silent. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. By the time my son woke up, strangers would be moving furniture out of what he thought was his home. He'd call me, maybe hundreds of times, his voice going from angry to panicked to desperate. I'd never answer. At the airport, I moved quickly. One ticket, one passport check, one security line. I'd chosen a flight that left before the new owners arrived, before my son could even start to piece together what had happened. I didn't want to see his face. I wanted him to live with the shock. As I boarded the plane, I felt no sadness, no guilt. The life I'd given him, the sacrifices I'd made, he'd already thrown those away long before this day. I was just making it official. When the plane took off, I looked out the window as the city got smaller, then disappeared under the clouds. Somewhere down there, my son was waking up to a house that wasn't his, a future that had vanished in a single morning. By the time he realized I was gone, I'd be on another continent, walking streets he'd never think to look for me in. I'd have a new home, a new life, and for the first time in years, I'd sleep without fear of what he might do next. I didn't run away because I was weak. I left because I finally understood that some people deserve to lose what they've been given. My son locked me away for using hot water. I walked away and took his whole world with me. By the time my son opened his eyes, I was already thousands of feet in the air, the world below me shrinking to a blur. He didn't know it yet, but his life had changed forever. The first sign came when he stumbled out of bed and walked toward the kitchen, expecting to find the same stale smell of coffee and yesterday's arguments. Instead, he heard voices, unfamiliar ones, echoing from the living room. Confused, he walked in and froze. Two strangers were there, a man and a woman, both in their 20s. They were smiling politely at a moving crew who was carrying boxes out of the front door. One of the movers brushed past him without even glancing his way. My son demanded to know what was going on, his voice sharp with the tone he always used on me. But these people didn't flinch. The young woman simply said, "We're the new owners. We closed on the house last week." His face must have gone pale. I can imagine the way his hand probably tightened around the doorframe, like he needed something to hold on to before his knees gave way. He asked where I was, if they had seen me. She shook her head, telling him that the old man had moved out early that morning. That was the moment it must have hit him, the slow, creeping realization that the house wasn't his anymore. It never had been. He ran to his room, probably thinking he'd find my things still there, some clue to explain this nightmare. But the drawers were empty. The safe was gone. The closet held nothing but the suit he'd worn to his wedding. He must have called me then, his hands shaking, his voice somewhere between fury and panic. I didn't answer. I wouldn't ever answer. Over the next hours, I imagine he called dozens of times, maybe hundreds. He would have called my lawyer too, demanding answers. But the lawyer would have told him the truth. The sale was legal, the money was mine, and there was nothing he could do. Every door he tried to open was already locked, and I held the keys. That evening, when the new owners began moving their furniture in, he probably stood on the sidewalk, watching strangers carry in boxes, knowing the life he thought was secure had been ripped away in a single day. His wife must have been there too, her voice sharp, asking what happened, her eyes cold with blame. Maybe she called her own family, trying to find a place for them to stay. The next few weeks wouldn't be easy for him. Without the house, without my financial support, everything would collapse. The bills would pile up. The rent for a smaller place would feel like a weight on his chest. Every hot shower he took after that, every drop of water would remind him of the moment he locked me away over something so small. I wasn't there to watch it, but I didn't need to be. I knew my absence would speak louder than any words. The silence, the emptiness, that would be my real revenge. Because nothing unsettles a man more than realizing the person he thought would always be there is gone for good. I didn't just take the house. I took the certainty he had in his control over me. I showed him that the father he thought was too weak to fight back had been planning all along, and that, more than losing the bricks and walls, would keep him awake at night. Now, I wake up to the sound of waves instead of slammed doors. The first light of morning spills through the small window of my seaside cottage, warming the wooden floor. I make my own coffee, slow and unhurried, letting the steam curl into the quiet air. There's no one banging on walls, no voices raised in anger, no footsteps pacing outside my door. Just peace. When I first arrived here, the coastal town felt almost too quiet. After years of living under someone else's roof, where every move I made was watched, judged, and controlled, the silence was strange. But over time, I realized it wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. I could take long showers without anyone shouting. I could eat when I wanted, sleep when I wanted, walk outside and feel the sun without glancing over my shoulder. The house I bought here is small compared to the one I gave my son, but it's mine in every sense of the word. I keep the windows open most days so I can hear the ocean. In the evenings, I walk down to the shoreline with a folding chair, sit, and watch the tide come in. No phone in my pocket, no obligations pulling me back. The locals treat me like an old friend, even though they've only known me for months. The man who sells fish at the market saves the freshest catch for me. The woman at the cafe down the street knows exactly how I take my tea. Sometimes they ask about my family, and I just smile. I don't tell them the truth. The past doesn't belong here. I've learned to live light. One suitcase was all I brought when I left, and I've never needed more. Everything I own now serves a purpose. Every day I live now has meaning. I don't waste my energy thinking about what my son might be doing or whether he ever regrets what he did. Regret won't change anything. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the last time I saw him. That morning when he unlocked the bathroom door and thought the world was still under his control. He never realized that was the moment he'd lost me forever. Some people believe revenge is loud, full of shouting and confrontation. Mine was silent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I just walked away and took with me the one thing he valued most. And now, as I sit on my porch and watch the sun dip into the sea, I know I made the right choice. Family should protect you, not imprison you. Love should be unconditional, not transactional. And respect should never have to be earned back once it's been given. He locked me in a bathroom for using too much hot water. I unlocked my life by walking away and building something new, somewhere far beyond his reach. And here, with the ocean as my witness, I will never be trapped again.